Hello, welcome to Tony's Bonsai. Who doesn't love Japanese maples? I know I do. I've got 3 plants here. It's the young material that anyone can pick up in the spring, fairly cheap. I'm going to show you what I do to add some interesting movement to them so that in a year or two they look like these 2 trees here. So let's dive in. I picked these trees up a few months ago in a garden centre. They were pretty much dying. There were no leaves on them, or maybe just a couple of leaves. They just hadn't been watered. So I got them for I think 50p or a pound, I can't really remember. And I left them outside, watered them. They came back to life, and we've got one Atropurpureum, which is the red-leafed one, and these 2 apparently are called going green. As I rotate this, you can see there's not really much to this tree. It's more or less just a stalk with a few bits of branches higher up. And as it is, it'll grow healthily, and I could turn this into a nice, just normal acer. But I need something happening down here. This just doesn't work for me. I'll start off with that dead branch at the bottom. That can go. And regular viewers will have seen me using vet tape many times. I'm only going to show you how I apply the vet tape to one tree. I won't show you on the others, because I've shown it many times before on my channel. It's simply just a way of protecting the trunk of a tree as we bend it, really. And it can be tricky getting around things like this branch here. So I'll just miss that, and then I'll come up. So I'm trying to avoid the buds, especially these buds here that I've come to. So I just kind of come up, if I can, sort of around them. It's difficult applying it to something with so many fine little branches as this, but I think it's worth doing just to try and protect the tree from the wire that I'm going to apply. Cut it lengthways, like that, and that gives me 2 flaps. And I just pull one of the flaps around and tie a knot. I sometimes get comments saying, why don't you stick the wire in the soil? And sometimes that is a good technique, but this is just a bit of soft composty peat from the garden centre. I've never repotted this or anything. There's not a lot of roots in there, so if I push that in, it just won't hold, and I won't be able to get that tight control down at the base. I find just by leaving a length of about 2 inches, I can then hold that and apply the wire. It gives me something to hold to. I work my way up the tree, again, as I did with the vet tape, trying to avoid all the branches and buds. I'm not particularly bothered if the coil is a little loose. It's not, that's not a problem, because I'm using a wire that's thick enough to do what I want it to do without it being really tight. And it'll help so that I don't mark the tree as much. So I've applied 1 piece of wire there. That wire is thick enough to bend this tree now, but to add extra protection, I'm going to add a 2nd piece. This 2nd piece doesn't have to be as thick, because it's there more to add strength to the bark to stop it splitting than it is to add extra bending power. It'll add a bit of extra hold, but that's not its primary purpose. And it's much easier to apply this thin wire. It's a piece of cake. And when it gets to the top, I'll just loosely coil it round. There we go. So that's the wiring done pretty quickly. You've seen me do it in real time. It doesn't take long. Now to decide what to actually do with the trunk. From here you can see we've got a nice branch here. The end's dead. but that branch is alive. We've got 2 branches here, and we've got a little branch in here as well. So we've got plenty going on, but this one here, I would initially say this will make a great first primary branch. The only problem is it's very long and there's no buds on it. So there'll be nothing happening until it gets to at least that height. So it's going to be a very long, kind of boring branch. So it wouldn't be my preference as my primary branch. I think I'd prefer either this one here or this one here to be my primary. That makes me think that I can almost ignore that. And in terms of bending, the trunk seems to go over that way at the very base, which is quite interesting. Using the pliers, I just twisted that piece that I was using to hold the base of the wire round, just to give me a bit of a lower holding power. And you can see down here, the trunk actually comes across in a bit of an angle. So this is the root base there, and it comes across and then up. So this is a natural bend, and it's almost saying come this way. So what I can do is, by holding that wire down at the base there, it's hard for me to show you really, but I'm just bending that round there. And I've got quite a bit of movement into that, considering this is a maple, and people think you can't bend maples. You can. I've got some nice movement, and then I want some more movement, fairly low down again. This is a twisting bend, so I'm twisting as I bend. There. You might have heard a little crack there. That wasn't the branch cracking, that was one of these buds. I think I broke one of these buds off. It wasn't the actual trunk. I could feel it there. So we've got some nice movement going on there. I just need to finish the top off. And the reason we'll bend the top back up is so that it's more healthy. I want this tree to have a good year. And if these are all pointed upwards towards the sun, it's most likely to have a successful, healthy year. So I've got some movement into that. That's basically all the work I want to do to this tree. But I've got one little technique that I can just show you as well. We've got this piece of wire up at the top that's it's a bit too long for what I need, but it's in a handy position for this branch here. So see this one, that it'd be nice if that moved out this way a bit. And one way that I can do that is just by moving that down like that. Creating a little loop. Ta-da! This next tree, it's a little more complicated because there's not just one main trunk going all the way up. We go up, we've got a very thin branch down here, which I quite like. And then we've got these 3 branches. And the decision is what to do with these. I can either do a trunk chop here. That'll remove everything above there. This does add some nice movement and some taper to the tree, so that's an option. I could go a bit more radical and actually cut it here, turn this into the new leader, that's a possibility. Or I could leave this trunk dead straight as it is and grow this into more of a kind of broom style tree. I love these kinds of options. Great options to have. I don't know what you'd do with it. Everyone will have their own ideas. I think a lot of people will be tempted to turn this one into the new leader. My issue is that this isn't actually that much thinner than this. You know, it's the same sort of thickness. It does move off in a direction, but it tapers here nicely to there, and then it tapers again. So my thinking is that one can go. I've left a stub for dieback, and I now need to select which one of these branches to keep. One of them can stay, one of them can go. And I'm going to be bending the main trunk. So if I'm bending the main trunk, I will want to keep this branch on the outside of the bend. So the bend will be coming this way. And if the bend's coming this way, it's natural for this one to come off in that direction. Therefore, I think this is the better one to keep. I've applied the vet tape and the wire now. Again, 2 coils, the same thickness as the previous tree. And I decided this branch wants to go on the outside of the bend. And this has got some nice low buds. So the internodes are not huge on this, which means it could be a good first branch. And so over she goes. Now the movement on a maple doesn't have to be crazy in the way it's often nice to put movement into a Scots pine. That's nice and subtle. It's kind of on the outside of a bendish. And then from there, we can come with a twist, sort of maybe around towards me a bit, like that. Just something like that. Nothing too outrageous. If anything, I do find this length here to be quite straight, and I would prefer that to have a bit of something to it. So I'll just try and bend that a little more. There we go. I prefer that. And there's no problem bending this top up because the tree gets much thinner up at the top, so it's a lot easier to bend. And maybe that will be planted at that sort of angle eventually. Change the angle of planting or something. But for the time being, I've got something quite interesting there. It is quite linear in that direction. And so I could go either way with this. I've got a nice little bud in here. It's a small branch, but it's quite nice. So I'd prefer that to be on the outside. So I'll just take this round like that. Push that to the outside and then bring this back up there. Yeah, that's good. That's good. It's a little bit snaky, a bit corkscrewy, but it's just a question at this point of making these things have some interest and some movement to them and stop them being boring. And that's job done. This third tree is probably my favourite of them all. It's quite interesting having sort of 3 trunks coming up from fairly low down, and it does have, it appears, I've not looked at the roots properly, but it appears to have somewhat of a decent nebari, or the beginnings of a nebari. So yeah, something to work with, and I'm not going to go pruning all these off, that's for sure. In contrast to the other trees where I was just trying to add some interest to a boring straight trunk, with this one I think I possibly need to look at it and decide where the front of the tree is, or the potential front. And I think it's either going to be there, with these two coming towards me, or here, that sort of view, with these two acting more as sort of back branches, and this is the main leader at the front. And I think I like that option. So we can pretty much say we've got a front here already to this tree. Now that I've decided what's happening with this tree and sort of the direction it's going in, we've got this lower, very weak branch down here that's coming at us. So I'll get rid of that. I'm lucky to have some nice low buds on this side branch here. My only question is, do I want these branches splayed a little bit wider than they currently are? I'm going to be removing them both here and here, so they're going to get cut back quite hard, but I'm just wondering if they might be better if they were splayed out a bit. In the end though, I don't think it needs doing. I don't think we need to put any wire on these. They can just be cut back to there. This one here because this is on what I consider to be, you know, the more dominant trunk, I then don't want this to thicken up too much. So I'll cut this back to those buds that are there. And this top piece, it's got a dead bit in there that can be cut off. And what do I do up here with this? I like the way this splits into two, but I would like to add some more ramification and development at the top. This has already got quite a nice change in movement there, but this one then runs up very straight, so we'll cut that back to there. And where this one changes direction, there's another bud that changes direction, which works well. That can go there. So that's a very different technique to the previous two trees, but each tree, you know, should be worked on, you know, depending on its own sort of merits. And for me, that's what needed doing with this tree. Looking at it, this is very straight. That's very straight up to there. So I could add some movement into that. So that could be bent a little. I could wire that and bend it a bit, just to take the eye off the straightness of it. Or it could be cut here, and this would then have a change of direction, and that would be more in keeping with these branches that are also quite straight. And now I think about it, I think that has to happen. I think we need this change of direction here. Otherwise, because these are going to have changes of direction from low down here. If I then leave that and that goes all the way up there in that one straight line, it's going to look wrong. So that one can go as well. So as I rotate that, you can see what I've tried to achieve. And we'll just have to follow the progress of that and see how that comes out. If that has a really nice year, this could be on its way to being a really nice tree in the future, I think. If you like Japanese maples yourself and you'd like to follow the progress of these trees, you know what to do. You can hit that subscribe, and I'll be updating throughout the year as to how these get on. I want to talk to you next about something that it's an interesting subject, and it's wire scarring. When a wire is left to bite in for too long, it digs into the trunk of the branches and it causes that swirling scar that you probably all know about. I was always told in maples, oh, you should never scar a maple. If you do, it never grows out and it takes 10 years to heal and all that stuff. And it probably is true on more mature trees, but in younger trees, that's not been my experience. This tree, and the one I'm going to show you next, had extremely heavy, deep wiring marks last year, and they've almost completely grown out. I wired this tree much the same as those other trees that I showed you earlier, and as you can see, it's given them some nice shape. And I forgot about the wire, basically, and it bit in, and I can hardly see now where even the marks were. Oh, here. You can see in here the lines where there were marks, and they were quite bad, but within less than 12 months they've kind of just blended away and sort of disappeared. Now, they were worse on my other tree. I'll show you those. I'm not saying this is ideal, it certainly isn't, but these were very, very deep. I'm talking they'd bitten right in. I had to kind of cut the wire out and pull them out because it had sort of buried right in. And again, within less than a year, they're in pretty good shape. Give that another 12 months, you'll barely know they were there. I'm certainly not advocating that you leave wire on to bite into maples and let it scar and stuff. It's bad technique and it's not what you should do. But I am also saying, don't be terrified of it. You know, don't be terrified of put wire in them. You know, they're not as brittle as people think. You can move them when they're young and they will respond to wiring and you'll get something quite interesting. In fact, I need to do a bit of pruning on this today, so we'll take a look at this one. This is one of those trees that I'm not certain was marked correctly. It was a going green it was marked as, but it seems quite a lot different to my other going green aces, so perhaps it was incorrectly identified, but it's growing quite finely without having, you know, huge internodes, which is great. And all I really want to do today is just prune back to lower buds. Just so that it doesn't go too leggy. I mean, this is lovely. This has got a lovely set of buds right down there that I can cut back to. That's great. And I'm just going around the whole tree really. Just doing that. These up at the top here, they're quite nice. And I'm sort of torn to cut them off, but that branch is just getting too long. It is a nice branch and I like the shape of it up to this point. I think my decision here is that I'm going to leave that for the health of the tree. I'm absolutely going to cut it back further down the line. So where we've got a double bar branch there, we've got a nice branch on this side. So I'll remove that one, and then in the future I suspect I'll cut this back to here. But I want to leave that on just to drive some health back into the tree, because it's not been the most healthy. So yeah, that's a good decision I think. As we come up this main trunk, again, I want to leave this on here to drive growth downwards. But I don't want both of these thickening at the same rate. And this moves off in a nice direction, therefore I'll cut that one back just to slow this one down and let this one push on. I think that'll just be better for the overall sort of design, but also the health of the tree. I've come back to this one in the terracotta pot. And in terms of how I should take this forward, I've got the same kind of issue in that the trunk comes up quite nicely here. It's a bit straight, but it does kind of sweep. But I like the way this sweeps up and then this sweeps away. Have we got any buds on this? Lower down? Not really. If there's any buds come out here and appear strong in the spring, I'll cut back to those. But until that happens, I'll just cut back to these buds up here. I'll leave that to grow. And round on this side, I don't mind this bifurcation there, where this trunk splits into two. We've got kind of an ugly branch there that's better off being removed. I've got another one in there that's also not ideal. This one comes from underneath here. I don't think it's great the way it comes down from the bottom. And I'm happy to just leave these two for the health. This one going up here, there's not too much happening bud-wise. It's really difficult for me to see what's happening. There's probably some dormant buds there. There's definitely a branch there. But again, because the internodes and everything are so small, I'm happy to just leave that to do its thing, and then hopefully when something decent appears from here, I'll cut back to that in the future. I was going to call it a day with those 5 trees, but then I remembered this tree that I worked on last year. It's one that I attempted an air layer on a really thin trunk. Didn't work. It did put roots out, but then it rotated and the roots ripped off. It's grown nicely and it needs something doing with it now, and I'm thinking maybe of adding some movement. This is the trunk that I cut off after the air layer didn't work, and I can cut that stump back now. So we've got a nice branch down here. I'm happy to leave that as it is. I think that adds to the tree. And with this stump, it should have some nice taper to that branch also. I try to keep my videos, you know, fairly pacey and moving along. Although bonsai's not all about doing stuff fast. What people might not realise is that while I'm filming, I often turn the camera off and just spend some time just looking at the tree, trying to work out what's the best plan of action. Now, some trees, it's quite obvious and it just speaks to me, oh, this is what you need to do. Other trees, you know, like these ones, they're so early in the development, it doesn't really matter. It's just about adding something to the tree. But a tree like this, it's got some major problems, really. Although, superficially, it looks quite nice and it looks like a really nice tree. And if you planted this in the ground, I'm sure this would turn into an absolutely beautiful garden tree. But that's not what I want. I'm after a bonsai. And we have to give these things some real thought with the knowledge that we've got. That's what I've just been doing for about 15 minutes. And I think I've come up with my answer. And it might not be the best answer, but it's the best one that I can come up with at the moment with the skills and the knowledge that I've got. So I'm going to share them with you now. So what am I banging on about? Well, this has got some very subtle movement, which I don't mind. I don't mind that this is subtle, slightly wavy. I think it looks quite good because it then comes out here, and that's great. The problem is the internode length between here and here. There is nothing on that whole length. So I can't expect any branches coming out of that. And it's quite thick. It's not much thinner than the trunk. This next branch has got some nice low buds there. This has got buds, but they're very low down here. And then it goes up and splits. So when I'm thinking, what do I want to do? If I cut the branch right up at the top here, I'm accepting this huge long internode. And I can't accept that. I can't, it's just no good. If I had buds here, it'd be perfect. I'd just cut back to here, that'd grow, and that'd be ideal. But it's not an ideal world, and I haven't got any buds. So I can cut this one here. So you can see there, nice bud. That's great. But then what do I do with this branch? And what I'm thinking is, I want to cut this here because I want this to be the new apex. And perhaps I can use this as a sacrificial branch to put some thickness into this lower section. And that's my plan of action. However, this one comes dead straight. You know, it's not my ideal branch. I love that angle coming off here. But if this is dead straight, what I then need to do is I need to add some movement to this myself. So I'm going to put a piece of wire on this main trunk going up here. And this is going to become the new tree. And I'm going to ignore this, but I'm going to leave it on. So I'll get some vet tape and wire on it and come back to you. One of the tips I learnt off Eric at Bonsai, I love his channel. I mentioned him before, I just think it's great. Is that if you've got a sacrificial branch, try to get it on a part of the trunk that's kind of hidden or pointing downwards, you know, not obviously visible. So when I talked about the tree before, I had it in this orientation, but I think it'll work best like this. And ideally, I'd like this sacrifice branch to be coming like down and out. That's ideally, so I'd like that to kind of be pointing downwards. And what I'm thinking is, initially, if I can get some movement low down in this trunk, you've got to be careful. I can't push it like I would a hawthorn or a Scots pine. But with all this support, you know, it's surprising you can manipulate these trunks like that. And that means from there now, I can hopefully bend this right round and leave this sacrificial branch with a bit of luck. There's a bud up there that I don't want to damage, so I'm being careful. And I'm rolling this around this finger. So as that comes round now, hopefully this sacrificial branch will be going onto the inside of the bend where I don't want it. Well, where I want it, where it'd be no good as a branch. So that'd be an awful branch, wouldn't it? Coming from the inside of a bend like that. But as a sacrificial branch, you know, that's not a bad place for it to be. I mean, I'm terrible. You know, I'm going to end up snapping this, I bet. I don't want to, but that's better there. Just got that bit more curve there. And then I can now, where's that bud that I don't want to damage? Oh, it's there. There, I'm just really want to be careful of that because that's such an important bud. There. And that bud's nicely on the outside of this bend now. Lovely. And if I can just add a bit of three-dimensional movement, because it's a bit on one plane, I would like to. If this is the front here facing you, let me have a look. Yeah, the tree's coming towards me, which is basically good. But I perhaps would like it, maybe from this side is better now, because it's going away. I'd like it to go away then, and then come towards. So from you there now, it's kind of coming away, and then if I could, the bud's there, and then if I can just bring it towards you there, that's better. So it's just taken some of that, just a little bit of that three-dimensionality away. If I can grab this down here, there we go, and bring that this way, that's added a slight bit of movement. There we go, that got it, there. So that's now coming away. The bud's there. There we go. There. That's a bit of a corkscrewer. So it's kind of corkscrewing up. But often with bonsai, that works well. And it looks good when you do that. So if it's the best option, I don't have a problem with it. I'll just try and take a bit of the corkscrew out by just doing that. There. That's better. And then possibly this end here, with a bit of luck, in the future, that'll just sort of grow upwards. It's hard to really manipulate that now. Although, as I say, I've got this nice bud here that could well be the new apex of the tree anyway. In fact, it will be. So I've protected that bud. That's going to be the new apex. So I don't need to worry about these coming out in that direction. I don't need to worry. This is in a great place now, this sacrificial branch. That'll just grow and thicken the trunk. And these branches are now in really good positions. So I'm not doing any more with that. I'm really happy. That's worked well. The only thing I will do, actually, is I'm going to put a piece of wire on this just to point it up to the light, just so it's a bit more healthy. So it's a super simple process, this. I mean, I'm just literally, all I'm doing is avoiding the buds, providing I avoid those buds, because I want those all to grow, to thicken the trunk. And I'm just pointing it upwards like that, just so it has a better year and puts more growth downwards. There is one last thing to do that I forgot. I'll leave this one to grow because I want to heal that wound up where I made that cut earlier, cutting that dead stump off. I don't want this to thicken. I don't want this to really have a strong year. You know, I'd like it to be healthy. We've got a huge internode there which will never be in the design, so I may as well cut that off. And really that's just so that this doesn't thicken up and grow too much. I want this to start sort of developing and ramifying. Doesn't need any wire because it's got some nice movement already, just swirling back, so job's a good one. That's this Japanese maple extravaganza over with. I'd like to thank you for joining me as always. Have a great day and I'll see you soon.